And a few more clearer spells across Northern Ireland, northern parts of Wales too, but chillier here. We could even see some pockets of frost and also some fog, and plenty of cloud across southern and central areas of England. Quite murky starts, and this fog slow to clear in places, so do take care if you're travelling around through the morning. Then through much of the day it remains fairly similar. Should start to see some sunshine across Wales and northern England, but that cloud is set to stay across the south and southeast, and turning quite blustery across the far north of Scotland through the day too. A cooler day on offer for most, but for many across Scotland, temperatures above average for the time of year. Heading into tomorrow, likely to see more outbreaks of rain and drizzle across parts of Scotland, quite blustery here too. And elsewhere, plenty of cloud around, though it is going to be staying largely dry. Both best of the sunshine just to the northeast of any high ground, but for most it's going to be quite a cloudy day on offer, and remaining fairly cloudy as we head into the weekend too. And that means temperatures are really going to struggle, so likely feeling chilly at times. Bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Well, better news in Lancashire on the M65. That police investigation has now been completed near Burnley, and the motorway is back open both west and east, but long residual delays remain. In Leicestershire on the M1, the inside lane on that three-lane stretch stays closed off southbound from junction 23 to 22, just south of Loughborough. A lorry's broken down in the roadworks. In Oxfordshire on the M40 northbound, the inside lane's closed from junction 8A to 9, just north of the Oxford Services turn, where a car's broken down. There are long queues on the M3 in Hampshire, where the inside lane's closed southbound at junction 11 south of Winchester. Recovery works underway following an accident that's been moved safely onto the hard shoulder. And finally in Kent on the M20, the inside lane of 4 is closed eastbound from junctions 6 to 7 near Maidstone. A lorry and a car have collided, and recovery work continues. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever. An incredible £50,000. That's tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this year. What would you spend it on? £50,000 could buy those treats you've always dreamed of having. And just one entry into the Great British Giveaway really could make £50,000 cash all yours. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word. Good evening. Some good news to talk about tonight. A ceasefire coming up in Gaza. That's got to be good news with hostages being released. And the Chagos surrender is not going to happen until after President Trump's inauguration, which of course means it's never going to happen at all. We'll talk about the economy. Can Rachel Reeves survive? I simply don't know. We'll talk about cancelled elections. 10 million people to be denied their right on May the 1st to vote for their local county councillors. And lastly, we'll talk about Gerry Adams. Is he in for a big taxpayer-funded payout as a result of our membership of the European Convention on Human Rights. All of that and much more. But first, let's get the news with Sam Francis.
Nigel, thank you very much indeed. At 7 o'clock, the top story tonight, well, it is breaking news from the Middle East that after 467 days of brutal conflict, Israel and Hamas have now reached a ceasefire agreement. That breakthrough follows intense negotiations in Qatar, where the Qatari Prime Minister is now holding a news conference in Doha. He has, in the last few minutes, announced that an agreement has indeed been reached between all sides involved. We understand now that the deal will come into effect on Sunday, the 19th of January. And the Qatari Prime Minister also says that the first phase of that agreement will continue for 42 days, including both a pause in fighting and the withdrawal of Israeli forces from populated areas of the Gaza Strip. Well, as the news broke, celebrations erupted in Gaza, Palestinians seen cheering in the streets. Meanwhile, in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem, demonstrators who have now long called for peace are holding on to hope that their loved ones will soon be home. The agreement must still, though, be approved by Israel's Security Cabinet, which is set to meet tomorrow. Here, Sir Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch have clashed today over the economy at Prime Minister's questions. They traded blows on debt, tax hikes and leadership stability. Kemi Badenoch warned the UK is now spending more on debt than on schools and hospitals, accusing the Chancellor Rachel Reeves of being unqualified and planning costly tax rises.
His Chancellor ignored all the warnings and ploughed ahead with an unprecedented borrowing spree, leaving all of us more vulnerable. Now we have businesses saying they will raise prices to cover his jobs tax. We have an energy policy that will drive up bills, and all the while we are spending more day to day on debt interest than we do on schools and universities. The Prime Minister refused to repeat his Chancellor's promise that she wouldn't come back for more. Will he now rule out any new tax rises this year? Yeah.
In response, Sir Keir Starmer called the Conservatives economic vandals and blamed them for a £22 billion black hole and what he described as the worst cost of living crisis in living memory. The Prime Minister also defended Rachel Reeves, calling fiscal rules ironclad, but he refused to rule out March tax rises amid rising borrowing costs. Well, we're going to cross live now, in fact, to Joe Biden, President of the United States, giving a statement on that ceasefire announcement.
It's a very good afternoon, because at long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. More than 15 months of conflict that began with Hezbollah's brutal massacre on October the 7th. More than 15 months of terror for the hostages, their families, the Israeli people. More than 15 months of suffering by the innocent people of Gaza. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families. The elements of this deal were what I laid out in detail this past May, which was embraced by countries around the world and endorsed overwhelmingly by the UN Security Council. The deal is structured in 3 phases. Phase 1 will last 6 weeks. It includes a full and complete ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces from all the populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, including women and elderly and the wounded. And I'm proud to say Americans will be part of that hostage release in Phase 1 as well. And the Vice President and I cannot wait to welcome them home. In exchange, Israel released hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. And during Phase 1, the Palestinians can also return to their neighborhoods in all the areas of Gaza. And the surge of humanitarian assistance into Gaza will begin, and the innocent people can have a greater access to these vital supplies. You know, during the next 6 weeks, Israel will negotiate the necessary arrangements to get Phase 2, which is a permanent end of the war. Let me say it again, a permanent end of the war. There are a number of details to negotiate to move from Phase 1 to Phase 2, but the plan says If negotiations take longer than 6 weeks, the ceasefire will continue as long as the negotiations continue. I've spoken to the Emir of Kuwait and the President of Egypt, and we have pledged to make sure the negotiations will keep moving forward for as long as it takes. Then, when Phase 2 begins, there will be an exchange for release of the remaining living hostages, including male soldiers, and all remaining Israeli forces will be withdrawn from Gaza, and the temporary ceasefire will become permanent. And finally, Phase 3, any final remains of hostages who have been killed will be returned to their families, and a major reconstruction plan for Gaza will begin. This is the ceasefire agreement I introduced last spring. Today, Hamas and Israel have agreed to that ceasefire agreement and the whole ending the war. You know, those of you who have followed the negotiations can attest, the road to this deal has not been easy. I've worked in foreign policy for decades. This is one of the toughest negotiations I've ever experienced. And we reached this point because of the pressure that Israel built on Hamas, backed by the United States. Hamas's longtime leader, Sinwar, was killed. Hamas's strongest supporter, Iran, launched attacks on Israel. And those attacks failed after my administration organized a coalition of nations to stop them. And after I ordered the U.S. ships and planes to come to Israel's defense, we also shaped Israel's strong and calibrated response, destroying Iran's air defenses, but avoiding an escalatory cycle of an all-out war. The United States also organized a coalition of 20 countries to stand up to attacks by the Houthis, including their missile attacks in Israel. Then, Hezbollah, another of Hamas's strongest backers, was significantly weakened on the battlefield, and its leadership was destroyed. With our support, Israel negotiated a ceasefire with them, and after that, Lebanon finally elected a new president who's not beholden to Hezbollah, and he can begin a new chapter for the Lebanese people. All told, these developments in the region, which the United States helped to shape, changed the equation. And so now, the terror network that once protected and sustained Hamas is far weaker. Iran is weaker. Iran is weaker than it's been in decades. Hezbollah is badly degraded. And after more than 15 months of war, Hamas's senior leaders are dead. Thousands of Hamas fighters are dead. And the military formations have been destroyed. With nowhere to turn, Hamas finally agreed to releasing hostages. You know, there was no other way for this war to end than with a hostage deal. And I'm deeply satisfied this day has finally come, for the sake of the people of Israel and the families waiting in agony, and for the sake of the innocent people in Gaza who suffered unimaginable devastation because of the war. The Palestinian people have gone through hell. Too many innocent people have died. Too many communities have been destroyed. In this deal, the people of Gaza can finally recover and rebuild. They can look to a future without Hamas in power. You know, the Bible says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Many peacemakers helped make this deal happen, including an extraordinary team of American diplomats who have worked nonstop for months to get this done. Secretary Blinken led the effort. Secretary Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Bill Burns, John Feiner, Brett McGurk, Amos Hochstein, and the Vice President worked relentlessly as we worked to deliver this deal. I'd also note this deal was developed and negotiated under my administration, but its terms will be implemented, for the most part, by the next administration. In these past few days, we've been speaking as one team. This has been a time of real turmoil in the Middle East. But as I prepare to leave office, our friends are strong, our enemies are weak, and there's genuine opportunities for a new future. In Lebanon, there's an opportunity for a future, free from the grip of Hezbollah, In Syria, a future free from the tyranny of Assad. And for the Palestinian people, a credible pathway to a state of their own. And for the region, a future of normalization, integration of Israel and all its Arab neighbors, including Saudi Arabia. At the G20 in Delhi in September 23, I rallied key countries behind a vision of an economic corridor from India across the Middle East to Europe. That vision can now become a reality. There are risks as well, including ISIS and Iran, even in a badly weakened state. But we're handing off then to the next team a real opportunity for a better future for the Middle East. I hope they will take it. Let me close with this. My friend for years in the United States Senate, former Senator George Mitchell, who did so much to forge peace in Northern Ireland, once said about diplomacy, he said, it is a 700 days of failure and 1 day of success. 700 days of failure and 1 day of success. Well, we've had many difficult days since Hamas began its terrible war. We've encountered roadblocks and setbacks. We've not given up. And now, after more than 400 days of struggle, a day of success has arrived. God bless all the hostages and their families. May God protect the troops of all those who work for peace.
Mr. President, how do you see the future of Gaza now, as you were saying?
Well, as we were just hearing there from the President Joe Biden in the White House, set to, of course, leave office on Monday, has been announcing that Israel and Hamas have indeed reached a ceasefire deal and hostage deal ending the fighting in Gaza. 3 phases, with the first phase of that deal lasting 6 weeks, focusing on the release of many hostages, emphasising that phase 2 of those negotiations will again take no longer than 6 weeks, and that he hopes, the President that is, that it will see a permanent end to the war and fighting in Gaza. We will, of course, keep across the rest of the details throughout this evening here on GB News. Now, though, back to Westminster and Nigel.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. Well, some good news this evening, at least on the face of it. You saw Joe Biden there taking great credit for the ceasefire that is about to come into place in Gaza and talking there about the hostages being returned. Now, there is still some more detail to do, but I wonder whether really it's Joe Biden's success. Donald Trump tweeted a few weeks ago, if by the time I get to office, hostages are not being released, there will be hell to pay. And it's a really interesting debate. This Gaza ceasefire, is this the Trump effect before he even takes office? Well, I don't know. It feels like it just might be that to me. I'm joined in the studio by Robert Fox, defence editor of the Evening Standard. I've also got Kwasi Kwarteng with me and Lloyd Russell-Moyle, regulars on this show. Robert, on the face of it, good news.
Yes.
But
it's not completely put away yet. Benjamin Netanyahu has said it has got to be ratified tomorrow by the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, and I've been looking up the Israeli websites and they've been saying, there are details to come up, as you rightly flagged, about the hostages themselves, the phasing of the release there, but now what is this? But we've got to know it quite well, the Philadelphia corridor. Yep. The Philadelphia corridor is the corridor which Israel insisted on patrolling, running across the south of the Strip. It is vital for Israel, and Egypt will be even more keen. And it has to be said on this very question, the deal months ago, which was very, very similar to this one, fell apart. So it's not quite over yet, but there is a momentum for it because I think where, again, the Trump effect, and I think it is the Trump effect, he's corralled Benjamin Netanyahu on this.
No, I think that's probably right. And Biden talked there about, isn't it fantastic, the hostages are all coming home to their families, but I mean,
I think it's going to be a pretty awful story. 33 are going to be released. We don't know how many of those, frankly, some of them may be bodies. We don't know how many are alive of those remaining. And it's we always knew the thing is going to be long and drawn out and phased. There's going to be 16 days and then 6 weeks. Can there be an enduring ceasefire? Yeah. And where does Hamas fit into the whole picture? Because Netanyahu said he was going to destroy Hamas utterly, and then you get Hamas's supporters like Qatar. And of course, as Biden mentioned, but the key player, there are two key players, one at a global scale, one regionally. Let's do the regional one. Terribly important is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the one that's really pushing this, and we can go into why that is. The revival of the Abraham Accords. Yeah,
and of course a big ally of Donald Trump's. Yeah. So a key motivator in this.
And the other one is China, of course.
Well, of course. No, of course. Quick comments, guys. It's not often we get anything that's good out of the Middle East, Kwasi.
Sure. Look, I think what Biden said about 700 days of failure, in this case 460 days. And 1 day of success, I think, was well put. And we've got to take the wins as we find them. But as Robert said, it's quite unstable. We don't know how it will be implemented. We don't know what the state of the hostages will be.
But it's still better.
Exactly. It's a move forward.
That's the point.
Exactly. That's right.
Lloyd, thoughts?
It is better. I mean, Biden points out that this is almost similar, Robert pointed out as well, almost similar to the deal that had been previously proposed. Most of the hostages have only been released through negotiation. And I do wonder if you look back and we see that Biden could have done more pressure, possibly the pressure that Trump has exerted earlier, and we could have lost. We could have avoided some of the absolutely awful losses of lives.
Very good point. And we know nothing, of course, of the British hostage, who we've not heard of for a long time. While you're here, something that I know is good news, really good news, is that Keir Starmer. Because I heard this morning that in Mauritius the cabinet had met. Yeah. And the Attorney General was back on a plane to London. Oh, my goodness, I thought, they're going to push this through. And I know what the reaction's going to be of the Trump regime, particularly, of course, as Mauritius is a signatory to this anti-nuclear treaty, which would have meant no nuclear facilities on Diego Garcia. Now, Keir Starmer has said, well, we can't get this done in time. We're going to leave it till after the inauguration. In geostrategic terms, this must be good news.
I'm sorry, it's Ludo or Snakes and Ladders. Back to square one, isn't it, Nigel? Nigel, you just mentioned, actually, the Mauritius, the governing party, is divided over this. The Chagosians themselves are divided on this, and they are livid, by the way, some of them, because they say we haven't been consulted on this. There's no long-term guarantee. And just to confuse the viewers, and the Maldives have come in and said, well, you're talking about contiguity, means we are quite close to you. Why didn't you consult us? So it really is falling apart. It's a powder keg that's reduced to powder.
I've always viewed it as being bad for us, bad for the Americans, bad for security, bad for the Chagosians. A pretty big defeat for Labour coming here, isn't there?
I don't understand why they have pushed this. There is no votes in it whatsoever.
Lawfare. They love lawfare.
Because we're run by human rights lawyers,
I think there is a problem that if you're run by lawyers and not politicians, we need decent lawyers in the Foreign Office, we need the very best lawyers there, but we also need politicians who have a political edge. And I'm afraid the way out of it has always been give the Chagosians a vote, and if they want it, then I will support it.
And the argument that keeps being made by Lammy and others in the Commons is there's no threat to the Falklands or Gibraltar because their people will determine. Well, as you say, the Chagosians have had no voice.
Sure. Look, I think it's been a humiliation, really, for not only for the government, but also, I'm afraid, for the department. The Foreign Office. I mean, they clearly were the ones who were pushing this. They said that James Cleverly had sort of waved it through. I'm sure they would have presented to the incoming government.
The 1981 deal on the Falklands, the same thing. Right. What a wheeze that
absolutely
was,
right.
too.
Should we just close the whole department down?
On the side.
Actually, that was a reason in 97 that Labour took development out of the department to have a separate department because they were fed up with the Foreign Office constantly meddling with things, and they wanted to set up a new department in a different kind of vein. And I do think it was a mistake merging these things back in because it gives the department more power,
that's a separate
not less
debate.
power, and the department's too powerful.
But it's their competence.
That's right.
I think you're all alluding to a much, much bigger problem, which is we look as if we've got a Mandarin class, not Mandarin class, caste, C-A-S-T-E.
Yes.
And I have been in the business, 57, 58 years, and I have never known the kind of middle, upper-level arrogance. Dear boy, don't bother me with the detail. Your little brain can't get round it. We have a real problem in trust in public administration at the moment, and that is
but
something...
the point Nigel made, or I can't remember whether it was Russell, is that Lloyd made, was that the issue was that it was coming from essentially foreign judges, foreign lawyers, who essentially said this is illegal, you've got to hand it back.
And it wasn't.
And exactly. And the department essentially saw their job not to look after our interests or our allies' interests, but to realise
the law. Some think that the Foreign Office have actually been looking after the interests of foreigners, not Brits, for many, many decades. Robert, you're a great favourite on this show. Thank you for coming in. And as usual, great voice of clarity. In a moment, we'll talk the economy, we'll talk the inflation numbers, we'll talk what's coming tomorrow, we'll talk, can Rachel Reeves survive?
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Tell us about the backlash situation, first of all.
Yeah, so the Duke and Duchess of Sussex visited a local food distribution centre, handing out food parcels to those who had been displaced or emergency service workers as well. And they happened to be captured by a local news crew. I think it was a Fox news crew. It's part of World Central Kitchen. That's a charity that they have supported for a number of years now, who've been doing this food distribution things. Whether or not it was a photo op, it's really unclear. I don't think we're ever going to get the answer to that. They didn't look like they were made up to look glam for the television. It looked genuine, but of course we know Meghan is an actress as well. So I'll let you make up your own mind on that one. But then we found out very late last night that the Duchess has asked Netflix to postpone her new lifestyle programme, and the Duchess has released a statement actually, and she says, "I'm thankful to my partners at Netflix for supporting me and delaying the launch as we focus on the needs of those impacted by the wildfires in my home state of California." She thinks it would be inappropriate to launch a glossy programme where she's in a $5 million mansion cooking food. It's an 8-part series, and hopefully by that time these fires will be well and truly extinguished.
Well, they're also getting criticism in the US as well from Jason Bateman's sister, that's the actor, saying that, talking about that photo opportunity that people are calling it, saying that Meghan Markle and Harry are no better than ambulance chasers and they're disaster tourists.
It is difficult, isn't it, for Meghan and Harry trying to find their place in the world. Are they media, entertainment personalities, celebrities, and doing Netflix and all the rest of it? Or are they going to be humanitarian workers like perhaps being members of the royal family would be? And I think at the moment they're kind of straddling those two different worlds, aren't they?
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, everyone's talking about the economy. We had inflation figures this morning that weren't perhaps quite as bad as they might have been. We have growth figures tomorrow that may well disappoint the government. Unsurprisingly, at Prime Minister's questions, the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, led on this issue.
At the budget, Labour were congratulating themselves for having the first female Chancellor, instead of ensuring the country had someone actually qualified to do the job. The Prime Minister claims he has full confidence in the Chancellor, but the markets clearly do not. So does the Prime Minister stand by the Chancellor's commitment that there will be only one budget this year?
She'll be pleased to know the Chancellor will be in place for many, many years to come. She'll outstrip them. We have one budget, that's what we're committed to, strong fiscal rules, and we'll stick to them, unlike the party opposite.
That was the one bit of PMQs that Kemi got right. It sort of deteriorated a bit after that, but the points she made were quite pertinent. I'm joined in the studio by Catherine McBride, economist and fellow at the Centre for Brexit Policy. So tomorrow's figures really matter, don't they?
Yes, to a degree. I mean, these things are coming out regularly, and, you can't take too much pressure onto one figure. But at the moment, the markets are really watching what's happening in the UK. And today, the inflation figures were slightly better than people expected. Yeah. But then if you actually look into what was causing that, for most people, the things we can't get around, such as housing costs, housing services, owner-occupying housing costs, they're all higher. But things that we can avoid paying, restaurants, food and clothing, things like that, the sort of discretionary spending, they were actually lower. So the average looks all right, and hopefully it gives the Bank of England cover to maybe cut interest rates in the early next year. But
Maybe.
But the worst things the Chancellor's done are not in these figures. So, the increase in the minimum wage and the increase in employer national insurance, they don't start till April. So it's, she's for people to be really getting too upset about this, you've got to say, well, hang on a minute, there's a lot of things that they said they're going to do which are not in the figures. They haven't actually happened yet.
So the impact of that's not yet been felt in these numbers. Yeah. And I mentioned the growth figures because and tomorrow won't determine this, but are we in recession?
Well, yeah.
Ask an economist a straight question.
Are we in recession? Well, yes, we could well be, and we won't be alone if we are. But it is, it's more a case of are they doing anything to help us get out of it? It's and that I'm not sure that they are, and they've been spending a lot of money on things that don't have a good return or an obvious return. Things like sending $11.2 billion to foreign countries for their green initiatives seemed like, something that you should do when you're very wealthy and you've got a lot of money to spend. But
or the up to $9 billion they were going to commit to the Mauritius government.
Well, yes.
They're giving away something that was ours anyway.
Well, exactly. That was another kind of crazy thing. In fact, add those two together and you're pretty much at to a 20 million
black hole. It's funny, Kwasi, looking at 30-year rates the other day, and they were inexorably going up.
That's right.
Albeit not as rapidly as the difficult time that you endured. I haven't heard the BBC screaming about
No, of course not. And I think it'll get, I'm afraid, I think it'll probably get worse.
You're pessimistic?
Because what will happen in March is that the OBR, we'll see the GDP figure tomorrow, and of course people will be looking at that. And then the OBR had very, quite sort of lavish expectations about growth this year. I think it was 2%.
Yeah.
And so...
Which now looks a long way away.
It looks a long way away. They'll revise that down in March, and that will create a funding gap because as your growth stalls, you don't get as much tax revenue in, and she will have that unenviable choice as to whether to borrow more money or raise taxes, and I don't think the markets will allow.
Cut public spending.
Well, I think Labour Chancellors cutting public spending is a very ambitious, politically very difficult for them. You've got the left. Yeah. John McDonnell has already said that would be politically unacceptable. Political suicide, I think, was his phrase. So it seems almost inevitable to me that she will come back to the House of Commons in some form of sort of spring statement. They'll say it isn't a budget. But they're
doing it that way. Yeah. And Lloyd, it's very easy to criticise whoever's Chancellor of the Exchequer. Yeah. This has been going on for a long time, centuries. But the one thing that strikes me, and Catherine made the point, they're not showing us a path out of it. And I honestly, I don't think I can remember a time when business confidence was lower. I met the boss today of a massive company in this country, employing tens of thousands of people, and his answer to what's coming in April, he's offshoring jobs. Somehow, they've got to bring some confidence back, haven't they?
Yes, let's be honest, some of the borrowing costs and the inflation costs, the inflation, which was a more positive outcome today than they were expecting, are not really anything to do with them. we have seen the cost of borrowing in most Western countries increase quite dramatically in the last few months, and we see inflation. Most of the big drivers of inflation are global market issues.
That's all well and good, but the business confidence thing. And that actually, and I'll be honest with you, Lloyd, I look at them, and this is a miserabilist government.
That's right. So they came in...
Everything's negative.
They came in very negatively, I have to say. And actually, you've got to look at what happened in that budget.
Yeah.
What she did was she increased taxes to the tune of £40 billion, which was more than they had briefed before. And the taxes, the incidence of the tax, where it fell, was essentially on business owners.
Well, isn't this
that was the majority?
Lloyd, isn't this the problem? What Kwasi raises? Very interesting. We've got the inauguration next Monday. We've got a new US Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, going in. His aim is to cut the size of the public sector and allow the private sector to increase. And I think we're doing the opposite here, aren't we?
No, I don't agree. I think you've seen that investment summit, which really brought together big investors into this country. You've got the announcements on AI, wanting to really be a leader in AI and some of this new technology. And I think really being the bridge between Europe and America. On technology and AI, Europe and America are going in very different ways. And there needs to be an entry to the European regulation of computing, for example, but with a more freedom, footloose approach. Britain is positioned to be able to do that. I think that they're...
because of Brexit?
Well, because...
Well, come on.
Some of it is to do with Brexit, but we've always had a margin of appreciation.
Let us go to the centre for Brexit
We've always had a margin of appreciation.
We are potentially in a good position here, aren't we?
We are, in terms of regulation. However, our electricity costs are far too high for us to ever be the birthplace of AI.
Have you seen today's numbers?
No.
Today's electricity costs were through the roof.
Oh, that's right.
We were, at lunchtime today, 52% of our power generation was gas. Gas that we import, of course.
That's right.
Yes.
At quite expensive prices. The chap that I met today...
We don't import the majority of our gas.
Just over 50% now, yeah. The chap
and
that I met...
more, because we don't invest in the North Sea.
The chap that I met today, who employs tens of thousands of people in this country, said this to me. He said, in 1990, our electricity costs, our energy costs, were exactly the same as America's.
Yes.
They are now 4 times America's.
Yeah.
It's a disaster,
well,
isn't
it's 6 times if you look at our industrial electricity as opposed to household electricity.
6 times?
Yes.
In industry, yes.
Yeah, it's much, much higher.
But we failed to build nuclear power stations, we failed to properly invest in wind and solar, we failed to actually look
but wind and
solar's making it expensive.
We've invested in wind
and solar do not work for anything like a data centre that must be on 24/7.
No, but what they do work very well is for domestic use. And so what you can do is you use them to be the domestic spine, and then you build a decent nuclear thing.
Domestic use,
they are very good for domestic.
The sun goes down when everyone turns their lights on.
Not true at all, because domestic battery power
Well, this is a proper debate that's going on here in GBNews. I said to you, there's no point going to the pub. You don't need to. You just sit there with a drink and watch us.
Where are the drinks?
Where are the drinks? Well, actually,
within short
a couple of years ago I was allowed to, but I think they cracked down on me, Thank you, Catherine, very
Alcohol
much
and tobacco were down in the CPI. I hope you noticed.
Yeah, I know.
I didn't.
I know. In a moment, we're going to discuss the cancellation of elections for 10 million people. I thought only dictators cancelled elections, but it'll appear the government and Tory cowardice is going to deny many of you a vote on May the 1st.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We could see some rather foggy starts as we head into tomorrow. Then through the day, we'll see a mix of cloud and some brighter spells, though it is going to be a cooler feeling day for most. Largely settled as we head into tonight as high pressure dominates, but a frontal system in the far north can bring some drizzle at times. This mainly across the far northwest of Scotland. Mostly dry for many of us. Plenty of cloud this evening across the south and southeast. This could be quite murky by the morning, likely to see some fog in place. Even some fog developing under some clearer skies, and also plenty of cloud across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Feeling chillier too, also under these cloudier skies, but for many it's quite a mild night on offer, particularly across the far northwest of Scotland. So to start the day tomorrow, plenty of cloud around across Scotland, but feeling chillier in any clearer spells. Also a chance we could still see some light outbreaks of drizzle across the very far north. Quite a cloudy start across Northern Ireland and a few more clearer spells across Northern Ireland, northern parts of Wales too, but chillier here. Could even see some pockets of frost and also some fog, and plenty of cloud across southern and central areas of England. Quite murky starts and this fog slow to clear in places, so do take care if you're travelling around through the morning. Then through much of the day it remains fairly similar. Should start to see some sunshine across Wales and northern England, but that cloud is set to stay across the south and southeast and turning quite blustery across the far north of Scotland through the day too. A cooler day on offer for most, but for many across Scotland, temperatures above average for the time of year. Heading into tomorrow, likely to see more outbreaks of rain and drizzle across parts of Scotland, quite blustery here too. And elsewhere, plenty of cloud around, though it is going to be staying largely dry. Both best of the sunshine just to the northeast of any high ground, but for most it's going to be quite a cloudy day on offer and remaining fairly cloudy as we head into the weekend too. And that means temperatures are really going to struggle, so likely feeling chilly at times. Bye.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Because you're measuring one against other.
I get it.
You know.
Yeah, that's
but we discussed that, but also are Labour's plans good plans? I think that's really important. How we do it? Right, OK. So what is going on here? It's completely and utterly mad. We have got a list of 15 county councils who will not, or at least they've requested, hold their elections on May the 1st. There are two other authorities that have done the same. The argument is that the devolution plans that Labour have got, the local reorganisation, means we have to suspend elections. Yet they admit it'll be 3 years before those plans are worked through, which, if you think about it, is 3/4 of the next term anyway. Labour will tell us, the government will tell us by the end of the month, how many of these 15 will be suspended. We're told it will be at least 10 or 12. Kwasi, you're lot are just running scared of fighting elections.
No, I think...
What do you mean, no?
I don't think that's true. I think what's the problem is that the government has plans to essentially reorganise local government, and it makes sense, I think, to see what those plans are before you can actually have...
It's going to take 3 years to come in. A term is 4 years. Why not have the elections? And why not have a public consultation about what these changes are?
Yeah, I agree with you about the public consultation.
So let's have the elections.
But the other thing that we've had is, you know, this debate has been going on for a long time about unitary councils, about local district councils. And it's generally the case when there are reorganisations that you wait to see what the reorganisation looks like before you have...
but that's fine, you can do that. You have the election, you debate over the next 3 or 4 years what the reorganisation looks like, and then have elections. Lloyd, this is monstrous. It's 10 million people. And it'll mean some of those Conservative county councillors elected in 2021 doing 7-year terms.
If all of those councillors on that list, of which on that county council list, all bar one are Conservative, if all of them get their elections suspended, it will be a disgrace. Let's be very clear about that. Because some of them are not in a situation to implement devolution or local government reorganisation quickly. Some of them, Lancashire, for example, is very far through in the discussions. They already have a plan of how it's going to be reorganised. You can see it happening within a year.
Yeah, but that might not be suspended. I mean, the government will decide.
Well, yes, but
which
I
of
think
these
that is the test.
County councils
the scale of it's huge.
If you're going to suspend Sussex, which is where I'm from, for example, we have no idea how the devolution is going to be split up. The government is insisting on this 500,000 number for the size of devolved or smaller authorities. Bearing in mind, no London authority is that number.
No,
and the London Mayor works. We need smaller districts.
No, you're
it's the
comparing
county
oranges
councils.
If we abolish district councils, guys, what we do to the rural and small town parts of Britain is make the cities dominate.
You're right. The district councils, I'm sorry, are the heartbreak of our local government, and the county councils are a disgrace to local government. The county council should be abolished. We should have proper regional authorities that replace the county councils and allow small districts. It is the wrong way round. You don't say in urban areas we should have smaller numbers of population, and in rural areas we have bigger numbers of population. That is completely mad.
Quasi honestly, no, look, we can argue about counties, or I mean, I'm not for regions particularly, but I do think the point Lloyd makes about district councils being relevant to the nature of the area.
So I'm sympathetic to that. I was lucky enough to be MP for Spelthorne, which was its own district council. It had its own borough council, and people felt very attached to it. I mean, they might complain about it, but they understood, you know, roughly what the borough council, the district council was responsible for. At the county level, you're right, it's a bit more remote. But the issue that you have is that with all those district councils, you've got all those bureaucrats, essentially.
No,
you've got much more bureaucracy.
I'm sorry,
you've
some
got
of the
much
worst
more
councils in our country, Birmingham, financial problems, commissioners having to go in. It's one of the largest councils in the country. Liverpool, commissioners going in, one of the largest councils in the country. No, you don't actually, not at that same level. You don't have mass commissioners going into small districts.
One of the issues that we had with district councils,
just doesn't happen.
And Spelthorne was the culprit in this.
Was the fact that we actually, do you know what? 1 second, Quasi. Do you know what? Actually, local politics really matters. Because it is the potholes in your street.
It does.
It is care that's delivered.
It does.
It is if your child has got a learning disability, what hope they're going to have.
Your solution is to abolish the county councils and just rely on the district councils, which I think is absurd because the county councils are responsible for education.
Lloyd thinks there's a regional level of government that could work.
And that's more bureaucracy. You're just creating more.
But the point is, folks, what this debate proves
is we need a proper consultation.
Given the emotion here, is number one, it matters.
It does matter.
So taking the votes away from up to 10 million people is monstrous. But look, and your lot are a bunch of cowards.
Look.
Total cowards. And number two, what this conversation proves is we need to have a proper debate on this.
So. Yes, or no? Of course we do. I agree with that. We have to have a debate.
So the election should go ahead.
We're having a debate.
So the election should go ahead.
The substantial issue we're not talking about, and I'm saying that at county
level... Do we live in a democracy, Quasi?
Yeah, we do. Of course we live in...
Should we have the elections then?
Of course we live in a democracy.
Should we have the elections?
And it's the government's job to decide which of those county councils...
No. You are twisting this round your neck.
When Brighton Authority was set up in 1996, they were elected free, and they didn't get rid of the other councillors. They had an overlap, so there was a decent transition as well. What they're proposing here is that you'd have a cliff edge as well. Elect the new set of councillors, and then if in 3 years' time you want new authorities, you elect them as a shadow body, and you hand over...
This wasn't even properly in the Labour manifesto.
Well, it's actually Michael Gove's plans that he laid out.
It was before Michael Gove. We've been talking about unitary councils for 25 years at least, and the argument in favour of them is that people understand what the unitary council is and they have a direct vote. At the moment, with the split system where you've got county councillors and local councillors, nobody knows, not one voter in 10
You are making the argument for a full public debate, and you're making the argument for elections to continue. We are supposed to be a modern democracy, just that this mob don't want elections because they're terrified, and they're right to be. In a moment, we'll discuss whether Gerry Adams deserves significant taxpayer compensation. No, really, we will be.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Storm Felix is set to affect central parts of the Mediterranean, bringing some rain, mountain snow and also strong winds. But further west, largely settled for the Canary Islands, Madeira, Portugal and also most of Spain. But towards the eastern coast, we could see some heavy showers here. The heaviest likely across Sicily and parts of Sardinia, and also likely to see some mountain snow across the highest parts of Italy and also Greece. Towards the weekend, though, largely settled and temperatures remaining around the same.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
According to a report from the RAC, many drivers see speed limits as a target rather than anything else. More than 50% of us think it's acceptable to break the speed limit.
So this morning we're asking, is it time to increase the motorway speed limit?
Let's talk to automotive journalists Danny Kelly and Steve Fowler. Gents, what a pleasure to speak to you both in one go.
I think we should join many countries in the European Union that have 130 kilometres speed limit, which is around about 81 miles an hour. I drive to London on a weekly basis, and I think the roads are capable of handling higher speeds. I think unofficially the speed limit, without getting pulled over by the local police at the time, is probably around about 78, 80 miles an hour. If a Bobby's on the motorway doing 70 miles an hour, he wants you to overtake him. He wants the free-flowing of that motorway to continue.
So should we change 70 miles an hour? You know, if people are going 80 miles an hour, just stick to 70 miles an hour as a limit. Yes, you know, it's funny when you're driving along the motorway and there's a police car going at 70 and nobody wants to overtake. But if the average is 80, just leave it at 70.
All the gantries now are fitted with the modern signage where they can change the limit at will. We all know that. It's hard to get up to 70 half the time. So, actually, we could apply those rules, couldn't we, at 80 or even 90 miles an hour and say, well, if the weather's bad, let's reduce it. If the fog's bad, let's reduce it.
Yeah, unfortunately, and I hate to use this phrase, smart motorways, but they're the ones where you have the adjustable limits. They don't cover all of the motorway network, relatively small amount of the motorway network. It is a limit. You know, it's not a target, as I keep saying to my kids. God, they're bored of me saying that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
I said earlier on we're in the hands of the human rights lawyers, one of them, of course, being our Prime Minister, who many years ago tried to win damages for a convicted IRA terrorist on the grounds that when he'd escaped from prison, when he was brought back into the prison, the guards didn't treat him very well. Well, this is almost unbelievable, but it now looks like Gerry Adams, of course, longtime leader of Sinn Féin, could be in line for a payday if the Legacy Act that's currently on the statute books is repealed, and he could, for unlawful detention, receive very significant sums of taxpayer money because it would be incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. I can't even imagine what some in the unionist community must think of this. I'm joined by former DUP MP Ian Paisley down the line. Ian, this is almost unbelievable, isn't it?
I was going to check if the date was April the 1st. It's one of those things which, really, but I'm not surprised. For a long time, we've had lawfare against the British state, wielded by people in the Republican community. And I think we do need to set an example on this occasion, and the government needs to take robust action and demonstrate, especially to lawyers. I mean, one can't blame Gerry Adams and people like him having a go. But what we've got to do is create a situation where lawyers tell their clients, this is completely no hope. There's no point wasting time in this, and we're not going to waste our time and do a no-win, no-fee case in this because it is such a waste of time. And unfortunately, at the moment, Nigel, we have a situation where it's not a waste of time, where in all probability, compensation could be awarded, and the government will have to then scramble to change the law and try and prevent that compensation from being paid. And I look.
And how much business would this proposal cause within your community?
people would be outraged. But it's not even that. Imagine what this does to police officers and to widows of police officers and to widows of soldiers and mothers who have lost victims, innocent victims, to the IRA and to others across Northern Ireland. And indeed on the mainland. Think of the mother of the shopkeeper whose son was blown up in the Baltic Exchange bomb. What would they think about this? That the people who perpetrated that grotesque injustice upon them as innocent victims, those people, the perpetrators, get paid by our taxpayers' money because they are victims.
Well, yeah, we have to say that Gerry Adams was leader of Sinn Féin and denied any terrorist links. Ian Paisley, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Well, of course, he denied those links, but we know...
Well, he was the political face of it.
The political wing.
Deny that. He was the political representative and he was the spokesman for what...
I mean, what a muddle we're in, Quasi.
Yeah, well, I think Ian hit the nail on the head when he talked about lawfare. You know, we've moved to a country, to a system which is governed and driven by lawyers, often foreign courts, foreign lawyers, the ECHR. And we were talking about the Chagos Islands at the beginning of the programme. And it's the same sort of thinking. It's the same idea that foreign judges are better placed than we ourselves.
I know. It's the whole mentality. By the way, Keir Starmer does say he'll try and stop. In this case, Gerry Adams receiving compensation.
I think he has to politically because it's impossible. It would be a disaster.
But we keep, Lloyd, coming back to this, don't we? Again and again and again, issue after issue after issue, where we find that our membership of the European Convention of Rights, frankly, is just out of date and doesn't fit the modern world.
No, I think that you've got a system here that is a very difficult one piece, that people did awful things on all sides, but the IRA are particularly notable for the awful things that they have done. And the struggle, the fight, the war, whatever word you want to use for it, was moved to a political conclusion, and that saved lots of lives.
That was 26 years ago, 27 years ago.
And that political conclusion requires us, meaning that you do sometimes have to follow the rule of law, and if people were treated badly on both sides,
you would compensate.
Then there needs to be a fairness in it. Now, I think there should be no need. There should be no.
Lloyd, surely, you know, I understand the logic of that argument. But when you link it to this particular individual, I'm not sure that holds.
Look, I think that there needs to be, again, a political solution here, a discussion with Gerry Adams and government officials.
I'll tell you what we'll do.
Leave
the ECHR and say, sling your hook.
No, because you leave the ECHR, you break down peace in Northern Ireland, and you're back to square one, and that's helped nobody.
Because the ECHR was written into the... So one of the things... Blair wrote the ECHR into everything, the devolution agreements, the Belfast, you name it.
But in this specific case, I don't see how politically the Prime Minister can go ahead with this.
But that's why politically you have a discussion to say, actually, if we go ahead with this, it also, on the other hand, threatens a peace arrangement because it creates more grievances. And so you come to a politically negotiated settlement that some of the top people will not claim, and I think that's what needs to happen from this.
OK, guys, thank you. Love you coming on the programme. Great, robust debate. Particularly on wind farms. Absolutely useless, but Lloyd loves them. There you are. That's what debate's all about. Just have a look at... I tell you what, people are in for a hell of a shock when they get the next quarter's electricity bill, because we have had very little wind for 2.5, 3 of the last 5 weeks. They're in for a big shock. I'm joined by Professor Goodwin. What is on the menu this evening?
Hi, Nigel. Well, we've got the big ceasefire. Obviously, everyone's talking about that. We're speaking to a campaign group who have been asking for the hostages to be returned for a very long time. Big news in Labour land today. They're bringing back this free speech law in the universities, but I'll be talking to a top prof about why he thinks...
Well, that's good news.
They're basically neutralising the key part of that bill, so talking a bit about that. And then we're also going to be looking at why the Reform Party is so popular among the working class in a new poll with a Labour trade unionist. And then we're going over to Washington to hear from somebody connected to the Trump camp to tell us what to expect from Trump 2, big inauguration coming up, compared to Trump 1.
Trump 2's happening already. You can see it today with the Chagos deal, with the ceasefire. It's happening already. It's going to be so great, or something like that. Listen, thank you, everybody. I'll be back with you tomorrow. But first, let's have a look at the all-important and increasingly windless weather.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We could see some rather foggy starts as we head into tomorrow. Then through the day, we'll see a mix of cloud and some brighter spells, though it is going to be a cooler feeling day for most. Largely settled as we head into tonight as high pressure dominates, but a frontal system in the far north can bring some drizzle at times. This mainly across the far northwest of Scotland. Mostly dry for many of us, plenty of cloud.